Hey everyone, welcome to the webinar on unit economics, evaluating the true cost of growth. I'm Nivas, Ravichandran, and I head marketing at Spendflo. And I have with me Rohit, who's the CFO at Infeedo. And welcome, Rohit.
Thanks, Nivas.
Yeah. Rohit, so I think obviously today, before we go into the topic, right? Like I think I'm just going to give quick context about the overall topic itself, right? Till 2022, probably mid 2022, I think growth at any cost was never mentioned as a statement, but I think was probably followed across. And I think finance leaders still held fort to a good extent, but I think the founders generally, or like people who wanted to see more growth, obviously over proceeded on certain aspects, and it became a little bit of a challenge for CFOs to hold fort for too long. But I think 2023 is when the tides have shifted, right? Like, and I think finance leaders have been able to clearly hold the fort on the piece where saying, hey, growth is fine, growth is great, but at what cost, right? Like what's your burn? How are you even looking at this as the right way to grow, right? I think I'm actually, this is a very appreciated change according to me, because instead of just going after like just crazy growth numbers and crazy burn numbers, this is more sustainable and this is more like dependable from a business standpoint. But I think I'd love to go in deeper on those things. But before that, love to hear an intro from you, Rohit.
Yeah. Before I go on to my intro, I just wanted to say that it is good to see a marketing counterpart making a statement that it's a good change. Not many marketing leaders might agree with this change, because I think marketing as a department is one of the most flamboyant part of the company, and they are the first ones to bear the brunt as well when the going gets tough. Anyway, folks, super thrilled to be a part of this webinar. This is Rohit, a qualified chartered accountant. I have over 18 plus years of experience working with some of the bigger MNCs like IBM, Ultimate Kronos Group, and Citrix. Before I picked the bandwagon of so-called startups with Blue Jeans, and I'm not sure how many of you actually know Blue Jeans. They actually created the video conferencing platform category, and Zoom killed it and nailed it. Obviously, Verizon acquired Blue Jeans, but they have just announced that they are sunsetting the Blue Jeans platform. This was a couple of weeks back news. And then obviously I joined another startup called Sign Up, and for the last 2.5 years, I'm associated with Infeedo as the head of finance, most recently as chief financial officer. So that's me. Overall, lot of good learning experience from B2B SaaS companies, starting from way early in Citrix, where we ended up acquiring a lot of cloud companies. And fun fact is, in 2010 timeframe, people used to joke around, hey, cloud is very cloudy. Nobody had a clue that how the cloud infrastructure will be hosted, what are the pros and cons of moving to a cloud-based setup. So it was very cloudy world back then, but I think those days have passed, and SaaS has seen those days of thunder, if I can say so, where everybody wants to be a part of a cloud journey rather than going into a traditional hardware or a software licensing business.
Fair. No, I think the shift has been phenomenal, right? Like I think from just depending on, hey, I want my software on my device, right, to now almost every single thing. And even for me, like I'm thinking about even music to be wanting on my device, to now it's just on the cloud and no one really bothers downloading it. And space on my phone or my device has become more meaningful rather than like having content or any other form. So I think definitely that's a very, very strong. And just Blue Jeans, I think, is maybe for another day, you and I will have that conversation. I think I've known Blue Jeans for a very long time, and I felt they obviously, I mean, Zoom picked up, and I think it's also being at the right place at the right time, where you just built the new form of technology and the market was ready, and COVID also picked up. I think Zoom was available pre-COVID very well, but I think like COVID just helped really, really well. I think Rohit, given that we're speaking about unit economics and just looking at growth, right? Like, though I am a marketer, I just want to understand, how do you look at this? Like, I mean, just balancing the growth point and the cost point, right? Like, I mean, just ensuring, hey, what do I hold true to?
Yeah. So I think at a very high level, there are some obviously non-negotiables, right? Because when you are planning for the entire year or a 1 year or a 2 year horizon, you agree and align on some important things which are non-negotiables, right? Some of them could be runway, some of them could be profitability, it could be burn multiple and so on. So I think keeping those non-negotiables in mind, they act as a pillar, right? That whatever you want to do, you are flexible to change midway throughout the year based on the market situation, based on the product evaluation. But some of these non-negotiables will not change, right? So you have to tie everything together so that these non-negotiables do not face a threat of not being met, right? Because last thing you want is that your plan goes haywire and you're not able to sustain your core pillars as well, right? Which reflect you as a company and which truly complements the mission and the vision statement of the company, right? So you base everything around that, and it helps you to generally balance your acts and educate and align the stakeholders internally whenever there is a ask for, let's say, a change in outlay or change in plan.
Got it. And I think you mentioned about non-negotiables, right? Like, maybe just from an overall standpoint, like what do they look like, Rohit?
Yeah. So I think, well, we both are Series A funded companies. If I can pick Spendflo and Infeedo both in the same bucket as of now. And I think number one is, as a company, how efficiently you want to run business, right? Whether the time is right, time is wrong, whether the market is boom, whether it is recession, it doesn't matter. Philosophically, culturally, you have to define what kind of culture do you want to set, right? Do you want to have a path to profitability, right? Or do you want to be a business which wants growth at any cost, right? Because it is fundamentally very important for you to align on those principles. Once those principles are aligned, I think the non-negotiables come from them, right? So for a capital efficiency or a path to profitability organization, it will be very clear that some portions of the business has to be profitable in the longer run, right? We need to be customer funded business. For some of the segments within the company, we need to be VC funded business for parts and parcels of the company, but not for the entire company. I think that is what you can carve out when it comes to non-negotiables, because last thing you want is you don't raise for existing product and existing market. You raise for innovation, you raise for crazy growth, and you bet high on experiments, right? So if your capital starts going into the existing market and existing product, then you are actually burning money. That is a real burning of money, according to me, not just on experiments.
Got it. Right. And probably what would be like top metrics that you really look at to probably say, hey, you know what, it's going in the right direction versus, hey, it's not.
Yeah. So before even we actually go into the high level metrics, it is important to address, what does growth mean? Right? Because we have seen this, that, hey, we want to grow at any cost, or we want company to grow. What is that growth? Is it enterprise valuation? Is it ARR? What exactly is that growth, right? You ask this question to different people, and I think people will have different answers. A product person will say, I need to see adoption. That, according to me, is a growth, right? My product adoption, or a weekly active user, daily active user, is a growth, right? You talk to CEO, he or she will say, obviously, revenue, ARR growth is more important, right? You talk to them, you talk to VCs, and they might, okay, revenue is growing, but enterprise valuation is more important, right? So growth to different personas pan out very different, right? But most commonly is, if you look at public SaaS markets, right? What do they look like, right? What is growth according to them, right? Their enterprise valuation is based on trailing 12 months GAAP revenue, next 12 months projection of GAAP revenue. Their valuations are based out of CFO margins, like cash flow from operations margins, EBITDA margin. These are unheard of when we talk about traditionally VC funded companies, right? We will always think about ARR, right? Now, when we pick ARR, what is that ARR? Is it booked ARR? Is it billed ARR? Is it realized ARR? Right? So every company has a different method to track. But most commonly, I have seen people start thinking of booked ARR growth as the most important metric, right? And I'd urge that we should track both booked versus billed because it tells us a gap which we need to address in the longer run. And those gaps actually provides valuable insights into unethical sales practices sometimes, maybe a long, complex implementation cycle, because as a company, that is a problem that you need to solve, right? So that is one. Now, obviously coming to the high level metrics, and I'll not spend more time because I think majority of you will know high level metrics like CAC, LTV, LTV to CAC, payback, rule of 40, and so on. There is a lot of material on the web, on the social, to learn about these metrics and apply to the business. But I will urge everybody who is listening to me that when you are calculating payback, don't go with the accrual MRR basis of calculating payback. Do it on a cash basis, and it will help you realize where the leakage is. Because just like booked ARR has its own issues, and the correct tracking might be a billed ARR. Similarly, your CAC payback from a cash perspective may actually give you a different insight than the accrual, right? Why I say so? Because if you are truly a prepaid business and your customers are closing multiple year or annual upfront contracts, and if you're receiving that money upfront, your CAC payback will be actually 3 to 4 months. Right? But same thing, if there is a delay in implementation cycle or your live dates are getting delayed into quarters and quarter, this CAC payback will shift. But if you do it on an accrual basis, this nuance will never come out. Right? So because we are addressing a unit level economics, what I have seen working beautifully for me personally is that when we dissect the entire business into different units or segments, these can be segments like enterprise, mid-market, or SMB. These can be regions like US, Asia Pacific, Europe, or it could be different products, right? If you're a multi-product company. But what we need to understand is when we say that the growth has stalled or the company is growing, it is not that every part and parcel of the company is growing. It is probably one part which is picking the most, and it is covering for the rest of the portions of the company. And that's where the unit level economics works beautifully when you apply the same logics and same principles to those units that you define, right? And to further elaborate that point, we all know that whenever there is a tough situation in the market, be it COVID, be it economic slowdown, or be it a delayed fundraise for few companies, right? The first area where automatically there is a freeze, apart from obviously headcount, is sales and marketing, right? And in fact, you can see if you study the public SaaS companies data, the sales and marketing spend as a percentage of revenue used to be 40%. It has dropped to 37 to 36% in the course of 1 year, right? So there is a lot of cuts which are going on in sales and marketing, though R&D, G&A investments are close to 25% and 18% respectively, that have not gone any sort of change, right? Now, when we look at sales and marketing, it's only two areas of the business, sales and marketing. I'll tell you what we do and what works beautifully for us. When it comes to sales, measuring a sales efficiency, I know people look at quota attainments, people look at booking to OT ratios, people look at sales velocity. But I'll tell you what, the most beautiful metric that we apply is a payback at a business unit level. That business unit level, let me explain to you with an example, is let's say there is a pod of enterprise which includes two reps, which is one junior, one senior rep, and there are two SDRs associated with them, right? There is a 1:1 tagging, you have named account list or you get inbound, whatever. You plot their cost month on month cumulatively, and against that, plot the business that they have closed, but again, not on accrual basis, but on a cash basis. Are you able to collect that money, right? And you do this with your other pods like SMB or mid-market. What I've realized is if an enterprise pod is not paying you back in the first 12 months, there is some inefficiency. If a SMB pod is not paying you back in the matter of 3 to 4 months, there is definitely something wrong, right? My expectation is enterprise pod should pay us back between 9 to 12 months, mid-market between 6 to 9 months, 3 to 6 months time frame for SMB because there could be complexity in some of the businesses. But anything more than 12, 9, or 6 months is a clear-cut red signal. This exercise actually also helps you in forecasting. Because a lot of times I've seen these assumptions that, oh, we want a scale business, let's hire reps, let's give them quota, and they'll start hitting quota. But if you have a trend that, hey, I expect my rep to pay back only on 8th month, you can very well plan that even if I hire somebody today, or even if I have to replace somebody today, I need to wait because this is the time that they will take to give me back my payback. Right? So this, and by the way, we also track it on an individual rep basis. So think about a rep coming and we showing them a mirror, which is kind of income statement for a rep ABC, which talks about the cost that we have paid to him, which is basically the salary, commission, and on the other side, we show them what is the revenue or the money which we have collected through the business that is closed by him or her. And believe me, that data comes very handy during appraisal process. Unfortunately, sales is very black and white. You can't hide, right? Numbers will tell you the accurate story, right? Same thing with marketing. If you just think and reflect on how you can apply the same logic and principles to marketing, and most of you might start feeling that I'm a huge fan of payback. I am, right? Now, there are different channels through which you create demand or intent, right? There is SEO, there is events, there is paid channels, right? And so on. You apply the same principles. How much are you spending month on different channels? And you have revenue attribution because you are anyway tracking that in CRM. All you need to do is just put the collections and you will see the real story developing that which channels actually are paying me back. See, it is very, very different than funnel analytics, which will tell you which channels of the company are performing from a velocity perspective and from a conversion perspective. I completely understand that. That is a very good thing to track and see. But payback completes the entire story because even if you are converting, but if at the bottom of the day, you're not able to realize value from those customers, why do you need to first of all go and close them, right? So I think that is where payback has worked beautifully. To be quite honest, we also do finance payback at Infeedo, right? And I think my team will kill me for that, but that is one of their KPIs that finance P&L has to be positive, right? Just for people who are curious, we obviously invest the unused capital, right, in a lot of markets. So we make sure that the entire finance cost is recovered from that interest or dividend, right? With a minimal risk, obviously, because we are not into money making business through investments, right? So we are very clear about that. But I think I have seen payback working beautifully. Obviously, you won't be able to apply this to R&D or
correct. That's what I was about
let's
to
say COGS. But I think I think what I've seen is product velocity. Your hosting infrastructure cost has a lot of inefficiencies. If you seriously work with product leaders and engineering leaders on these two aspects, a lot of inefficiencies get caught. The second is you can also look at SaaS comparable headcount ratios, which gives you some good indicators in terms of what should be your product velocity, what should be your sales reps to engineers headcount ratio, how many PMs do you need for 6 to 8 engineers, for example. That way, you at least can start tracking and understanding how your organization is evolving, right, with the R&D needs. And COGS is also very important, right? Because cost of servicing a customer in different geographies could be very, very different, right? So tracking that and ensuring that that does not bloat is also very important, right? So those are some of the unit level metrics that we track on a regular basis.
Right. No, and I think Rohit, I had a I think beautiful part, right? Like I'm just gonna what I really loved about this is just segmenting it into different either be it business units or be it regions or be it even let's say enterprise markets, right? I think that's a very beautiful way to even look at it. I think one aspect, right? Let's say for a channel, especially because again, the marketing mind in me is asking this question. How do you generally? How long do you generally allow for a channel to be able to say, hey, you know what, this isn't working or this is working, right? Yeah. So how do you generally take a call on this?
Yeah. I think obviously I've never seen the 0 to 1 journey. So whenever I've joined a company, there is already a channel identified which is working well, right? So there is always this question that, hey, if we have to open another channel, what could that be? And we align on experiments, right? The beautiful thing with experiments is that you want to do that. And as a finance leader, you want to support it. The ugly side of that experiment is if you become a little loose and allow that experiment to fail and not take hard calls on those experiments, you start bleeding, right? So any experiments that I personally see in my desk is something which I align with the requester that, hey, what is the experiment that you want to do? What is the outcome that you expect? What is the timeline, right? If you think that you need 6 months of investment before you can show ROI, yes, obviously come with data, but more importantly, if you do cross questioning a bit, you can test whether the person has done his or her homework before approving that, right? Because some people are super clear about what they want to do, what is the outcome that they expect, and there are checkpoints that they manage that, hey, Rohit, on a monthly basis, we'll do this. If by month 3, we don't see this, we know that this outcome will not come in the next 3 months, we can immediately stop the experiment. We align on that. We do a mutual handshake. I assign a budget, walk out of the room, and I just wait for that milestone because I trust that person that when he or she is so clear about what experiment they want to run, what is the outcome and what is the milestone, all I need is where are you tracking it? Show it to me on that date and time, so that we can take a decision whether to stop or continue that experiment. But largely, I've seen Google AdWords, for example, needs at least 3 to 6 months of testing before you can clearly call it out that it is working or it is not working.
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna crop this piece and put it out as a YouTube short saying CFO's take on Google Ads, right? I'm just gonna market it that way. But we actually have a question around marketing.
Sure.
One of the audience, Bharat, asks, how do you identify what channel as the source for a customer, right? Especially given that there is a multi-touch piece, and who gets the end, the cookie. The customers will attend webinars, engage at conferences, read blogs, and may reply to cold emails as well. In that case, how do you decide?
Yeah, I mean, this is a question for dispute resolution panel or
oh God, yeah,
maybe
I've
IT-80s
been through
of
this at
this thing.
Freshworks. I've been through
But
this
I know, and this is a very interesting question. Thanks for asking this, Bharat. We have struggled, to be quite honest. There is no clear-cut answer. I have seen both the sides where people track first touch point and attribute the customer to the first touch point, and then we personally at Infeedo we attribute it to the last touch point. But there is this constant thing that, hey Rohit, no, this is wrong, because people might have heard about us through a referral, but if they are just going and clicking an ad, you are attributing to that because that was the last touch point. Let's say with a webinar or a roundtable invite, that becomes a different this thing, right? It is very hard, to be quite honest, to take a call. I think all of us who are the stakeholders within the company need to align that, hey, this is the way we will attribute. And at Infeedo, at least, we have attributed it to the last touch point, right? Because it makes sense, because that is the most recent touch point. And that is the most recent engagement that you had done with a prospect before they turned into a customer. I'm not sure if Bharat will agree, or he got
neither
that answer,
does Nivas, but yeah, I'm going to move on to the next question on that. Hey, Rohit, especially from a SaaS business standpoint, right? Like churn is obviously like a more stronger problem. I think just how do you go about like predicting or planning for it, or like how do you keep churn in mind when you're calculating growth costs and unit economics and even best practices?
Yeah, I think churn is the biggest threat to any business, right? Especially when you're aiming to grow very fast, right? And what we also need to understand is that yes, there are segments which will churn more. So again, unit level economics can be applied. But I think one of the important things which metrics don't tell us is that constant theory of must have versus nice to have value proposition of your software or services, right? Majority of the companies tend to believe that we are must have, but the ground reality is very, very different, right? So I think one important exercise is to constantly test your PMF to understand, hey, is your product relevant today? Is the same product going to be relevant 12 months from now or 24 months from now, right? Because world is changing and it is changing at a very fast pace, right? Technology is taking over. People are right now thinking about how to use technology rather than why should we use technology and so on, right? But the most important aspect, what I've seen largely is that predicting churn is dependent on few metrics like product adoption metrics, usage metrics, which can be tracked, and you can easily plot that whether customer sentiment is red, green, or yellow based on the number of tickets that they are raising, number of bugs that you are able to solve for them, what are your tats, and so on. But majority of the time, it is also a gut feeling, because you are connecting with a Spock inside that business to give you a lot of intel on the renewal, that hey, is the renewal under a threat, and people plot RGY or predict churn based on that. I think what has changed in the last 12 months is this unknown factor that your Spock can also move out from the company. What happens then? Have you established other champions who can pass on that confidence to you? Secondly, see, any company going through a particular event, be it IPO, M&A, their priorities become very, very different.
True.
Right? Some of this intel may or may not be available, but will start impacting your churn, right? And then all other metrics will automatically go down. I think it is important for CSMs today to realize that not only they need to rely on the internal usage and adoption metric and their relationship with the Spock or the champion, but they also need to identify multiple champions within the company so that they can address and at least get a response from people within the company on what's happening. But they should also try to do research if possible. By the way, it is easier said than done, but if they can go the extra mile in understanding if there is a outside or external threat or a situation which can lead to a churn, at least you can forecast and predict it, right? Having a surprise is better than unpleasant surprise.
Got it.
Right?
Right. I think, Rohit, this leads me to the next question, right? Like, I think there are two aspects of it. One is the new business or the incoming business, right? Like, I mean, both sales and marketing, right? Like marketing, just from a spend standpoint and like the budgets standpoint, and sales from a booking standpoint versus a collectibles standpoint. And also there's a customer success piece, right? Like saying, hey, who's going to stay, who's going to be breaking up, right? Like, I think, how do you keep these, like how often do you communicate with the other departments? And also just keeping both like marketing informed, catching up with sales to know, hey, what's coming in, and customer success to know, hey, who's going to stay. Well, how do you communicate with multiple departments and stakeholders, Rohit?
Yeah, I think it is very, very important, right? Because what I've seen is if you talk individually, people are concerned about their own words, right? A marketing will be most concerned about, hey, whether I'm building pipeline, whether
Correct.
I'm generating enough traffic and enough pipeline,
Mm.
right? Sales is more concerned about closing,
Mm.
right? Booking,
Mm.
right? Less on collection, but more on bookings. Sorry for being brutally honest here. Customer success obviously looks at net retention revenue, churn,
Mm.
retention expansion. But I'll tell you with a classic example on how, if we start taking decisions based on siloed unit economics, we can actually take some really bad decisions. I'll just
Mm.
give you an example. Let's say you identify that Google AdWords is the best performing channel in terms of generating traffic,
Mm.
generating leads. And
Mm.
it also proves from sales funnel analytics that the conversion rates of that particular channel is also high. The
Mm.
sales velocity, you pick all the metrics and it works beautifully well. Now, if
Mm.
you take this metric and step the gas or press the accelerator, you'll pump more money with an anticipation that you will grow more. You will end up acquiring more. But let's say you plot the net revenue retention of all these customers, the retention cohort of all these customers, which has been acquired through a Google AdWords channel. And it shows that after 6 or 12 months, they are churning.
Mm. Mm.
In the longer game, you are putting so much time and effort in acquiring those customers. But if you're not able to retain those customers, does it even make sense to scale that particular initiative? Right.
Mm.
So I think I don't know if marriage is the right word, a marriage of all these metrics and taking a look at the entire piece is something which only an unbiased
Mm. Mm. Mm.
person or a view can only do. And fortunately, CFO is in that boat,
Mm. Mm.
right? Where he or she has an unbiased view. We are
Mm.
not attached to a business unit, right? We are trying to be more holistically,
Mm.
and we take a look at the entire metric and see what makes sense for
Mm.
us in terms of cutting down or over indexing on,
Mm.
right? And I think educating sales
Mm.
on net revenue retention, educating customer success on funnel metrics, educating marketing on
Mm.
retention is a game changer,
Mm.
right? I spent a lot of time with the entire company during the all hands by creating small content around why these metrics important, how NRR actually impacts enterprise valuation. And I think the key takeaway for everybody is that everybody is aware of why these metrics are important and why we are tracking it at a company level and why we should track it at a business unit level to identify the areas where we are bleeding the most. And I think
Right.
once we are able to educate and make departments aware, I think
Mm.
generally there are peaceful days.
Mm. 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 No, I think I completely agree, right? Like, because what I've noticed is most of the times, right, like when there is a good news, right, like it's a funding news, right, like, or if we've hit like a revenue milestone, right, like, or if it's a sales milestone or marketing milestone, it's mostly the business leaders that come and make those flamboyant announcements. But I think only when, like, let's say something goes wrong, right, like, or when hey, certain numbers aren't looking good, I think they immediately bring in the CFO to say, hey, you know what, some numbers are red, right? I'm like, okay, you know what, so how do you expect, or what is your take on tackling this? Because most of the times you're the one who's playing the bad cop as well, right? Where probably saying, you know, you mentioned about, hey, if they don't hit these particular milestones, I'm going to have to put a stop, right? Like, and you're probably bearing the bad news or playing the bad cop to say, hey, you know what, this needs to shut today, right? How do you approach that,
Yeah.
Rohit?
No, I think very important, right, for CFO to be the bad cop,
Mm.
right? But there are tricks and trades on how you can actually be more friendly while still saying no, right?
Right.
Which is actually not to say no at the first go, right?
Mm.
I think when people are approaching you as a decision maker, they
Mm.
don't want to hear no.
Mm.
What you need to tell them is an alternative,
Mm. Mm.
right? Hey, what if we do this?
Mm. Mm.
Right? Hey, I don't think this is making a proper justification because this is what the data is telling me,
Mm.
right?
Mm. Mm.
Majority of the times when you so you're not saying no directly, but you're
Mm.
actually throwing a lot of data or
Mm.
you're throwing an alternate,
Mm.
which takes the conversation to a different level where people start thinking, oh, he's
Mm.
not saying no,
Mm. Mm.
right?
Mm.
And the whole philosophy there is, how can I help
Mm. Mm.
where I want? I'm basically stopping it, but I'm not saying no,
Mm. Mm.
right? How can I change that mindset where people are not hearing no, but
Mm.
people are hearing a solution
Mm.
or an alternate,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Uh, it leads to a lot of brainstorming sessions,
Mm.
which I
Mm.
personally love because I think that is where innovation comes.
Mm.
Um, if we operate with some constraints,
Mm.
it leads to the fuel for innovation.
Mm. Got it. Got it. And I think just one question, right? Like because especially when you're planning for certain things and when it doesn't go a particular way, right? Or let's say, how do you what is a sustainable growth, Rohit, right? Like I mean, because obviously pre 2020 or 2021, I think very aggressive targets are kept, and that's when a lot more like investments are being deployed to make those experiments happen, right? And sometimes it runs, sometimes it fails, right? Like, but hey, what is a like a like a sustainable growth uh, target, right? Like when sales pushes back, sales most of the times pushes back, or even marketing pushes back, right? But hey, what is the optimal, or I don't think we have a perfect answer, but yeah, just curious on what's a sustainable
Yeah.
growth target to just ensure unit economics are being like.
Yeah. To be quite honest, it is a very tough one to answer. And
Right.
quite honestly, I have missed on, let's say, I've set the targets,
Right.
but there has been days and quarters when those are not met, right? And people
Right.
start questioning, hey, were we too aggressive,
Right.
or was it unrealistic? What though I believe, and this is just my belief, by the way, putting a huge caveat to that's my personal belief, that you have to be aspirational,
Mm. Mm.
right?
Mm.
When you're thinking about targets,
Mm.
right? And you have to be aspirational, which complements your mission and the vision of the company. It should take you a step closer to
Mm.
achieving that mission and vision of the company, right? You ask everybody a question: what will make us happy
Mm.
a month from now, a quarter from now, a year from now? Just
Mm.
that,
Mm.
right? And you capture those aspirations
Mm.
and you try to say that, okay, this is what a great plan
Mm.
will look like. And
Mm.
then you build a as is plan, which
Mm.
means there is no innovation, no new market, no
Mm.
new product. And this is what your baseline shows based
Mm.
on the trend analysis.
Mm.
Now you know the delta. And by
Mm.
the way, it is a huge delta.
Mm.
You
Mm.
start plugging what do you want to do in the next 1 quarter or 1 year to bridge this gap? You
Mm.
want to be here. We are here, right?
Mm.
Should we open a new market?
Mm.
Should we innovate and build a new product?
Mm.
Should we look at new lead source for generating more pipe? But
Mm.
there is absolutely no historic trend
Mm. Mm.
available for these. All these are experiments. All
Yeah.
you can hope is if there is a concrete plan of trying that experiment, there are milestones, outcomes attached to it, there
Mm.
is an investment proposal attached to it. You are taking a bet. To be quite honest, you are taking a bet, but
Mm.
you align that
Mm.
in the beginning of the fiscal year that, hey, this is what we are gunning for,
Mm.
and create what if scenarios in terms of best case, most
Mm.
likely, and worst case.
Mm.
But in my view, worst case cannot be below as is,
Right. Right.
because that means we are doing fundamentally something wrong,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And then we can align the board.
Mm.
But
Mm.
I always believe that there has to be some aspirational
Mm.
goal. Otherwise, you will always lose that
Mm.
willingness to go that extra mile,
Mm.
right? To achieve 110 or 120% instead of 100%.
Mm, mm. No, I still remember like one of the times when we had set a very in one of my previous companies. I don't want to name, so just to avoid this thing, but we set a very like a very aspirational target, and we actually did an 89%, right? Like, but when we were presenting it, I think we said, hey, we had this target, but this thing, and the team was like. Everyone knew that this was a very achieved target, but just looking at it on the slide, we were like, shucks, we didn't achieve targets, right? Like that immediately comes across, oh shucks, did we not do good enough, right? Like, but
I think communication is very important, Nivas,
correct,
right? As you
correct.
rightly said, see, at a leadership level or at a CXO group, if you are aligning that this is my aspirational target, you
Mm,
don't need to communicate that aspirational target
mm,
uh, to
mm,
everybody, right?
mm,
It is there in one of your sheets, in one of your goal setting exercise that we are aspiring for this, right?
mm,
But to
mm,
the rest of the company, you actually present a most likely case
Mm, mm,
right? Because that is what you want people to achieve.
mm.
Because what if you end up communicating a worst case situation, believe
Mm.
me, people will just take that as a benchmark and try to
Correct.
achieve that, right?
Correct.
So that is how we are able to at least communicate. But I completely agree, communication is a very key aspect of
Right.
playing this game.
Right. Hey, so Rohit, we're just gonna we're almost on the top of the hour. So I'm just gonna quickly this webinar is being brought to you by Spendflo. And if any of you would like to know more about Spendflo, we are a company that helps companies optimize on their SaaS spends. If you're spending a lot of like dollars on SaaS and want to optimize on it, feel free to just reply to the poll, and we'd love to take it up from there. I do have a couple of questions coming in from the audience, and I have one personal question as well, Rohit, before I let you go, because has a question saying lots of metrics being spoken about. As a CEO who wants to build a data-driven culture, what are the top 5 to 8 metrics one should track?
Yeah, I think Vikas, excellent question, because in most of the seed series or early stage companies, there is no CFO, right? There's, in fact, the finance function is completely outsourced, right? So CEOs, along with the business analyst or founder's office or chief of staff, is generally the flag bearer of these metrics. I think first and foremost, continue tracking booked ARR, but please start please start tracking billed ARR, and more importantly, GAAP revenue. I have seen crazy 409 evaluations where people do EBITDA calculation as ARR minus OPEX, whereas it has to be a GAAP revenue minus OPEX, right? So understanding GAAP revenue, understanding EBITDA is very, very important for CEO in general. Apart from that, I think funnel analytics is super critical, right? Because you bleed a lot when you look at your conversion win rates. You actually get a lot of interesting insights on why you are winning and why you are losing, because that is more important. Your CAC LTV when you start may not present a true picture because you are not scaling up, right? You are in a 0 to 1 motion or a 1 to 5 motion. Scale has not hit, right? So you can track, there is no harm in tracking, but if you start benchmarking yourself against those metrics, you might end up taking wrong decisions, right? I'll just take 1 minute to explain one more important metric which people start tracking, and I don't know why. It is ARR per FTE. I'm sure people would have heard about it. Like, as a general rule of thumb, people say that, okay, 100K ARR per FTE is the right metric. So, hey, are you bloated? If you are at this million of ARR, how many people do you have, right? I mean, how can you do that when you're operating in a different geography? A US sales rep is carrying a million quota, an Indian rep might be just carrying a 200K quota. How can that same ratio apply? So interestingly, I found a metric which we have started tracking very, very recently called ROSE metric. It is return on your most significant asset in the company, which is people. So how that metric works is, in the numerator, you put the revenue generated, and in denominator, you put the salaries of all your FTEs plus contractors. So you're taking the FTE count out of equation. You're actually comparing your payroll cost versus revenue. And that metrics give you a good indication whether you are actually bloating, under-investing in people, and so on, right? So I think there are loads of metrics, because, but I think important build, collections, burn multiple, capital efficiency. Not many CEOs track that diligently, but that is where they end up having a situation where runways go for a toss, right? Because experiments tend to overstretch and we are not able to take hard calls. So I think those are the few metrics which I will recommend a CEO to track.
So I think you mentioned not to probably, track CAC or payback in some of the early days, right? Like, because you're going from the 0 to 1 motion. At what stage would you recommend probably they should start looking at some of these metrics?
Yeah, I think post 0 to 1, once you know that PMF is obtained, you need to scale now. It is important to start tracking, right? Because the breaking will start happening then, right? Because you will end up creating a lot of channels. You will experiment. But if you don't start tracking those metrics around those experiments, you'll overstretch.
Rohit, I think I have a question. Right? Like obviously, the first day when we got on the call, I did notice all the medals that were hanging behind you, and I'm pretty sure the folks on this thing. So you mentioned you've been an avid runner. Oh, we're getting more questions actually. Cool. Yeah, just probably addressing the question. Like you've been. Like I think I've seen your LinkedIn photo as well, and you've definitely transformed since then. Would love to just hear about how do you balance work just as a CFO versus like your personal like fitness or anything.
Yeah. So I sometimes jokingly tell in folks that F for CFO is not for finance. It is for fun or fitness as well. Right. So I think very, very important for everybody to make time. Otherwise, we will all end up having excuses. I think morning time works perfectly for me. Right. So there is a time window which is available. I drop my daughters to the school bus stop, and I know that I have an hour before I can get ready, and I make use of that hour. Now, whether I'm doing running or gym depends on what my objective is for the coming quarter, because I have quarterly running targets as well. Right. So but that is my time, and nobody can take it away from me, barring obviously some board meetings or important client or customer meetings if they are planned. But I've seen that if you get into a routine, you'll be able to continue. It's a matter of just sticking to that routine.
Great. So I think we have one final question that we're going to take from Bharat here. How often do you speak with marketing about experiments, budgeting, and resource allocation?
Yeah. See, typically I speak to them on a quarterly basis, but we have our mid-quarter checkpoints as well, because we reallocate our funds if, let's say, we want to start a new experiment because the existing experiment probably is not going in the right direction.
Fair. Hey, Rohit, I totally love this conversation. I think I'm gonna have like small bits taken and being put on YouTube I think more of the clickbaity ones probably. But I totally love this conversation, Rohit. I learned a lot, and thank you so much for coming on board and doing this webinar with us, Rohit.
Hey, my pleasure, Nivas. Lovely talking to you, and I hope the audience had some key takeaways as well, which they can apply. Happy to help one-on-one in case anybody needs help.
Sure. What's the best way to? Is it LinkedIn, Rohit?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn works the best.
Okay. I think I'm going to give anyone who's on this call a quick hack, right? Like if you're going to send Rohit like a LinkedIn connection request, probably just send him like a connection request with a custom note and tell him what's like the one good thing that you really liked about this conversation. It works throughout, right? Like, I mean, not just for this webinar, but anywhere. Because especially post a webinar, people get a lot of these connection requests on LinkedIn. But if you're able to just say, hey, you know what, I attended this and I really loved this point, or I really liked, or make it even make it even controversial. Say, hey, I don't agree with this point, right? I think that opens up a better conversation rather than just a generic connection request. But Rohit, thank you so much for doing this on a Thursday evening. Totally love this. And
my
looking
pleasure,
forward.
Nivas. Yeah, same here. Looking forward to catching up soon.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining in today. And looking forward. We do host a lot of these webinars on a regular basis. Would love to see you in some of the upcoming ones as well. Thank you so much, folks.
Thank you, audience.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.